Bases dropped on another episode of Soccer Down Here. It is a Wednesday, which means it's a Wall Pass Wednesday, which means you can send us whatever question you want. Generally soccer related, but you know, if you want to get some more of John's bad food takes, go for it. That works too. You can use that hashtag if you want. Whatever you guys want to get into on a Wednesday, and there's a lot of stuff to get into. We've got MLS news. We've got the Premier League back. We've got updates in a number of different countries about either coming back or what's going on now that they're back. We've got Bayern Munich as the 8th time champion in a row in Germany. Is that good? Is that bad? We'll talk about that. We'll get into all kinds of stuff today. You can send in your questions on Twitter at SoccerDownHere. You can join us on twitch.tv/SoccerDownHere. Send in your questions there. You can send us an email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. All the different ways to be part of the show, and that's what we're here for on a Wednesday. It's June 17th. The Premier League gets their games in hand out of the way today. 2 matches. You also have the Coppa Italia final today, which is what I'll be watching. Juve and Napoli. We'll see if Gennaro Gattuso can pull off the upset and lead Napoli to a trophy. What are you excited about today, John?
The Premier League is back.
Oh, you're one of these people, huh? Are you going to start tweeting football is back, even though it's been back for a while? And
No, not at all.
Football's coming home.
Football's back.
It started in Germany like a month ago.
Yeah, exactly. No,
well, you're the one who's so excited about the Premier League coming back. So why
of the two of us, you said you're watching Coppa Italia, so I'm going to watch the Premier League. I'll probably
so you're
be
just
flipping
watching
back
it because
and forth.
I'm watching something else. That's what you're doing.
I mean, yes, I'm an opposite. I'm a nattering nabob of negativism. So that way I'm going to watch what you're not watching. And that's why I figured I would be topical this morning for those watching on Twitch and break out a very old Sheffield United jersey.
Oh, very nice. Sheffield United's in the first game. Aston Villa is the opponent. That's 1 o'clock NBCSN. 3:15 Manchester City and Arsenal. Your other games on today, and there's a bunch. In Spain, you have Osasuna and Atletico Madrid at 4 o'clock. Valladolid and Celta at 1:20. Those are on BN Sport. The Coppa Italia finals on ESPN. 2:45 start with a little bit of a pregame. 2 games in Germany on FS2. Both of them are FS2. Eintracht Frankfurt and Schalke at 12:30. Borussia Dortmund and Mainz at 2:30. Lots of stuff. Lots and lots of stuff. I mean, you've even got the Danish Superliga on ESPN Plus at 1:55. You've got the second leg of the Costa Rican semifinals tonight at 10:30 on Centro America TV. Herediano hosting Alajuelense. Herediano's got some work to do in that second leg at home. All kinds of things today on TV. Lots of things to talk about. Where do you want to start, John?
I have a QOD. You want to start there just to have it to the table?
Sure.
Okay. So yesterday, and this goes into our Bayern discussion, Bayern wins for the 8th time in a row, wins the league. Yeah, they've won more than 8 games in a row when they've actually played, but they've won the league 8 years in a row. So I was thinking out loud, and this goes for our favorite Liverpudlian, Nathan Pugh. If the inevitable happens with the Premier League as well, happens with those who follow Bayern, plug it into your favorite team. Bayern has, I think, 2 games left in the regular season, yet they, so what do? Do you sit your stars? Do you give them runouts? Do you have them as a part of your 18s? If there's nothing to play for domestically, then what do you do with the rest of the year? That's my biggest thing. It's my question of the day. Do you sit them? Do you play them just to keep them match fit, just to have them going out there in the current climate? Do you sit them? It's like your job's done. You're out the door. Have fun. Enjoy the rest of the year. And then when we get into the Premier League discussion, that's when my second QOD comes. But do you sit your stars for the rest of the year knowing that you've already clinched something?
You already started with a false comparison, John.
Sure.
Liverpool and Bayern Munich are not in the same situation. Do you know why?
Because one will be playing another competition after this season is over, and after their regular season is over, and the other will not.
Mm-hmm. And that factors in. I mean, that has to. The problem for Bayern Munich is you've got 2 games left. Is it 2 games in the next week? I don't remember the last week of the Bundesliga season. You're going to have a month between that game and the second leg of the round of 16, where you go in with a 3-0 lead. You've got the tie under control against Chelsea in the round of 16 in the Champions League, but you can't just pack it in and say, hey, superstars, you're done for the year. You're good, because you're not. You're not. So Liverpool is. Liverpool is out. They lost that second leg. After extra time, they're done. So they're wrapped. Are they still in FA Cup? Do they have FA Cup to deal with?
Do not believe so.
I'm trying to get caught up. I don't think they do. So if they're done after winning,
if they're done, yeah.
Then, I mean, the problem is if you're some of those stars, you're going to be like, well, we just did all this training and another preseason to come back and play a game or 2 games. We'd like to play some. I think you'll see more rotation and maybe shut them down a little early, give them an extended break. But I don't think it's going to be, okay, let's say things work out for them to where they win the title game 1. I don't think you're not going to see their superstars the rest of the season. But do you see them, because you have 5 substitutions to work with now, do you see them play 45 minutes here? Do you see them play maybe 60 over here? Do you see that time diminish and then give them an extended break? Because look, they're not going to have one, and this is going to be weird for the bodies of these guys, because they've had this break early, and then they're going to have another kind of mini break, and then they're going to come back into a new season. So it's tough to manage that. It's where your sports science department is going to have to be key, and you're going to have to lean on those guys. Some guys might need to play through, but just cut the minutes back. Some guys might need a break. And you never know what can happen with injuries and such. So for Bayern, it's a whole different conversation, because you've got a Champions League that you're looking forward to. And yeah, you'll have essentially a warm-up game, although anything can happen in these things. I don't know if Chelsea's going to overturn a 3-goal deficit, but you've got more to play for. So you're not shutting it down after this, but do you, in these last 2 games, give guys a break who might need it? Absolutely. Do you want to keep players fresh? Absolutely. But we're in absolute uncharted territory here for a sports science department, for a manager, for Hansi Flick, because you've never had a calendar like this. You finish, you got 2 games that don't mean anything. You've got a month or so. Then you go into the second leg of the round of 16, but then you go into a bit of a sprint with single-game knockouts in the quarterfinal, semifinal, and final. And you want players to be fresh for that, but you want them to be sharp for that. That's a tough balance. That's a really tough balance. It's going to be hard for Bayern. I'll be curious to see what they do in these 2 games. I'll be more curious to see what they do in that month of time in between, because I don't know how you keep players fully sharp. I mean, maybe that game back, maybe that does help them a little bit. That's their game to get sharpened up against Chelsea with a 3-goal lead, and then you're just straight into the intensity of the quarterfinals. It's hard. Liverpool's a different situation, though. They're able to play young guys. They're able to blend guys in, but you have to think about workload for players, because they're not going to have a long break after this season ends and the next season starts. It's going to be about a month. And you might want to find a way to manage minutes for these guys. So I don't know if you'll see Mo Salah, for example, not play after they clinch, but are you going to see his minutes restricted? I would assume so.
FA Cup, Liverpool is not in the final 8, and those
round
of final 8 is not this weekend, but next weekend.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And those games, or at least 2 of them, have been moved to ESPN as well, and one of them will be head-to-head with the NWSL kickoff match of North Carolina and Portland on CBS. Sorry, FA Cup, not watching you.
Nope. Now, I'm just looking forward to taking a look at the NWSL and that particular cup in Utah. I'm really looking forward to it. With the schedule being announced yesterday, the full grid, and the inside jokes with Meg Linehan and her timeline on Twitter, I thought it was pretty funny until the schedule got released. Now the schedule's released, and now I'm probably going to buy this. I'm going to drop the $6 probably to get CBS All Access.
Yeah, I already did. It's worth it because they're supporting the game. They're going to have Champions League next season as well, so I'm in on that. The NWSL's got to put more out about this tournament. I want to be excited about it. I'm trying to be excited about it. I want to cover it, but there's not much coming out from the league, and there's a lot of questions. Kristen Press reportedly not going to play. Haven't had that declared officially. Megan Rapinoe, it still hasn't been declared officially that she's not going to play.
Right.
Are there any other national team players who are not going to play? It sounds like Ali Krieger's going to play based off an interview that was given. But there's a lot of questions. Like, I want to be excited about this, but there's not much coming out about it. And when you try to find information, when you try to get it, there's not much out there. It's got to be better. It's got to be better. There's got to be more coming from these teams. And look, we know, the way they're having to come back to train and the way communication staffs are cut short or their availability is limited, there's still workarounds. We're seeing it with MLS teams who are putting out lots of content around this. And, okay, maybe you don't have a drone. Maybe you don't have certain things, but we can get pictures of training. We can get updates from the players. You can send questionnaires. You can get things out there. There's so much unknown that it's a little unnerving. That's got to change on the NWSL front. It was like that before the season. It was like that last season. After the Lifetime deal ended and the NWSL media situation changed, it's been difficult, and it needs to be better because I'll always go back to the study that was done ahead of the 2019 Women's World Cup. One of the major things that prevented people from becoming a bigger fan of the women's game was access. And that's twofold. It's twofold for me anyway, the way I look at it. One is the games being available. Okay, CBS All Access has stepped up. They're going to provide that for you. You have all the games. You're going to have them produced in a very professional way. You've got games on CBS for the first time ever. These things are great. The Women's World Cup, everything was available. There was lots of wraparound coverage. Great. All that stuff, great. The other part of access is from the teams, is from the federations, is from the leagues. All that basic stuff that we need to be able to talk about it on a regular basis, to look ahead and start to think, all right, how's this team going to play? How's this team going to play? This player's not available. This player's playing well. This player said this about the opponent that they're playing. We need that stuff. It's the stuff we talk about in any other league. We need that from the NWSL as well. The access to see it, but also the access to information. It has to be better. For people in our role, we shouldn't have to dig so hard for information. And we don't want to. We want more information. We want to talk more about it. We need a little help from the league and the teams. And I hope we get that. And I hope this ramps up quickly because we're a week and a half away and we still don't know who's opting out and we still don't know much about how the teams are training at this point. We need a little bit more. We need a little more support here from the league and the teams.
And I think at the same time, for those who aren't the diehard NWSL fans, the ones that follow the teams, day in, day out, in season, out of season, I think that to bring in that casual the casual viewer, the person who's hopping in for the first time, to just drop some teases on social media or however you want to spread your stories, just some featurey kind of things, some getting to know yous for some of the players outside of the realm of the women's national team and what we've seen in women's World Cup scenarios. Some of the really cool stories that you can kind of tease, hey, this person is going to be on CBS. They're part of the NWSL. They're going to be on CBS All Access. I think those players also can bring the casual person in, and to be able to tell those stories and share those stories coming into an experience gives you another avenue to be invested and interested if you're not one of those diehards. And we're not seeing that yet either.
Well, no, there's nothing.
No.
That's what I said. It's not even about a certain kind of coverage. It's any coverage. It's any information. We need anything right now. We're not getting updates on reports about key players who a coach has said they're not playing and a local beat writer has said they're not playing. That was a week ago.
Yeah.
We're not getting any updates on this. You're asking for tier 2. I'm asking for the basic level first.
Yeah.
Something. We need more here. And it shouldn't be so hard to get it. And I really hope it changes. And I don't want to pick on it, but we've got to talk about it so it changes. It has to. There's no reason why it doesn't. If you have we had this conversation about college sports and other sports, comparing them to soccer. Well, it goes the other way. If you've got SIDs at small college programs who don't have a ton of resources, like an NWSL front office communications department, and they're pumping out all kinds of information about their players and about what's going on, and we're not getting daily training updates from teams. I mean, the league has posted 3 stories since the announcement return, I think. I might be giving them an extra one. It's just not enough. We need more, and it can be done. It's not anything that can't be done. It's what needs to be done here is put more time to it, more resources to it, and if that's something that the teams and the leagues have to do, so be it. But we need more, because it's hard to get people excited. It's hard to get excited about it if we don't know the storylines, if we don't know the situations. The big news that has come out in the last couple of days is Alana Cook, U.S. women's national team defender, who could have played for England, went to camp with them, but made her USWNT debut back in the fall under Vlatko Andonovski. She is coming to play for OL Reign on loan from PSG. That's an interesting move on a couple of fronts. One, she's a top player coming in to play on loan, and I'm guessing she'll take Rapinoe's roster spot, completely different kind of player. But for Olympique Lyon, who is the owners of Reign now, to bring in a player from PSG on loan is an interesting one. Little surprised they didn't bring over a player from Lyon to play in this if they would have wanted to, but Alana Cook's going to get a chance to play in the NWSL Challenge Cup for Reign, and I'll be curious to see how that goes over. That's the biggest news right now. That's pretty much it. First game's on CBS in about 10 days, and I hope we get more storylines about what should be, on paper, a great match. North Carolina and Portland. We figured once the schedule was drawn up that would be the matchup that got to CBS for Game 1. It's 2 teams that have been in the championship race over and over and over again. It's the 2 biggest teams in the league, and that's the one that should be on CBS. So let's get hyped up for it. Let's get the storylines going. Let's get the conversation going between the 2 teams, and let's get more content out there. We need more to talk about.
You are correct. It was 3 stories right now. After the Challenge Cup Draw Live was announced that it was going to be at noon Eastern, you had the preliminary round schedule, Soccer Holdings releases plans for a new training facility, and then North Carolina and Portland kicking off the 2020 Challenge Cup. That's it story-wise on the NWSL website.
Yeah, I mean, nothing. One is about a team that starts next year, and one is just a schedule update. Nothing else. And look, MLS pumps out content. They will take things that are being rumored about players and they'll write a story about it. They will take the content coming from the teams and they'll write a story about it. They'll have interviews. It can be done. Even in this weird time where you don't have a bunch of media on site, that's where the teams have to push even harder to get stuff out because the media is not available to be on site. It's not safe. You have to manage these situations because of the coronavirus. Well, the teams have to push harder, and they have to push that content out harder. And I hope the NWSL catches up and we start to get ramped up over the next 10 days.
Katie Weaver's in this morning. She agrees on the lack of NWSL content. She follows a lot of women's soccer people and teams, and her feed is crickets leading up to this event. It's disappointing. And now I fear, and this is Katie, and now I fear it will get buried with lots of other soccer ramping up.
All right, I'll go ahead and break the fourth wall for a second. So we're working on potentially over at 92.9 The Game and with Intercom a NWSL women's soccer podcast that would start on the 92.9 The Game side and would hopefully go to the radio.com sports side and have women's soccer covered there for the first time. Yesterday afternoon, I reached out to all of the media contacts on the league's website, the league and the 9 teams. So 10 emails went out yesterday afternoon. I've got 3 replies so far. That's where you're at. And I don't get it. I don't get it. You know, in the email, it's like we're going to start a podcast. Here's who I am. Here's what we're doing. Here's what I'm working on. Here's where it's going to go. Can you add me to your media list? And can you send me anything that you guys are putting out as a preview of the Challenge Cup? I've got 3 replies out of 10. It's disappointing. It's got to change.
Yeah. No doubt about it. We get into the question of the day. Tafka is in this morning with his thoughts early on. He says, is Bayern being 8-time champion in a row good? It's not great, Bob. If the Bundesliga didn't field so many Americans, I'd never watch under normal circumstances, if it's me. If there's nothing, in quotes, to play for, sit your stars, period. They aren't going to get better in the next week. The only change could be injury, and I don't think playing an extra match for an extra week keeps them sharp, in quotation marks. They'll still be training, but games aren't worth it.
It's not that simple, Tafka. It's not. Training doesn't keep you sharp. For Bayern, what's hard is it's not like you are playing your Champions League games in a week or two. There's going to be a month in between. That's what's difficult. That's where your sports science department has to chime in because every player's different. Some players need to play as much as possible. Some, they can turn it on and off a whole lot easier. You do have that second leg of the round of 16 that you're in really good shape. You should be fine. That can be your warm-up game in some ways. But this is a complicated one. Just training is not the same thing. Now, I'll tell you why I say that. Look at playoffs. Look at situations where a team has a bye and another team has to win a game first and then comes in. Go back to the old MLS format with the 2-legged conference semis, conference finals, and you had the play-in games first. And a lot of times you'd have that play-in winner have to turn around 3 days later, 4 days later, and play the first leg on the road in that conference semifinal. You saw far more upsets than you should have on paper. And I think it's because one team didn't play and was a little out of rhythm, and the other team was sharp. Now, being sharp is great, but you can get to the point that sharp gets overridden by tired. Bayern, with that break, it's not quite the same thing, but also, your question about tired, okay, no, you're going to have a break, but also your sharpness. You're not really going to be able to do too much to stay sharp in that month either. You can play a game behind closed doors, you can scrimmage your reserve team, whatever. It doesn't really change anything. So Bayern's in a tough spot. For Liverpool, there's nothing to play for. You just might want to keep guys playing just because you're not going to have a normal offseason. But that's down to stuff that's beyond me in terms of sports science, because they're not going to have 6 weeks off and then come back and ramp up. They're going to have a month off-ish. Yeah, about a month, about 4 weeks in August off. And then they're going to come back in and start playing games. It's not even that you're going to come back to camp and then start playing games in October. I think the plan right now in the Premier League is they finish the last weekend in July, And then you have the UEFA competitions, and then their plan is to come back and start in early September because they don't want to get out of whack. So you're not really going to have an off season. I mean, you might give players a week off, but they're going to come back into training. So do you take this time now to give those guys that time off? I don't know. I think so for Liverpool. For Bayern, it's really complicated. I just honestly don't know what the way for them is going to be. And I think they're going to struggle. I don't think they're not a team that I would look at as a favorite in the Champions League because they're going to get finished so much earlier and they're just going to be sitting around. And that's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt them in a big way. Luckily, they do get that one game, second leg against Chelsea with a 3-goal lead that'll help them warm up a little bit. But I think they're going to be hurt by this. Other teams who are playing all the way up against the start of the Champions League will be in better shape.
Yep. All the information I have is August 8th to start the Premier League. Or did that change because of...
Yeah, that's impossible, John. Remember the pandemic that we're having right now? Remember?
September 11th is what this...
Yeah. There we go.
There we go. September 11 to May of 2021.
Yeah. That pandemic thing and that Champions League that has to get finished in August, they kind of changed that schedule a little bit.
Yeah, just a bit.
A little bit.
The second piece of information gives you that August 8th one. Actually, the first piece of information, I take it back. You search 2020-2021 Premier League season. First piece of information, Saturday, August 8th.
One day you'll learn how to use Google and also your brain because you need that when you use Google too. Bernd Dursberger's chimed in with our info from the Bundesliga. He is our Bundesliga insider on SDH. Yes. Bayern already announced they'll give their players 12 days off after the Bundesliga season, then go back into training for Champions League. So they might do the same thing. That 5 subs gives you some flexibility in managing minutes, but still maintaining a level of sharpness. Do they the 2 games they have left? Do they play half their starting lineup, 45 minutes, 60 minutes in one game, and then the other half the same in the other game, and manage those minutes and just see it out? Yeah, maybe. Bayern's a little different too because there's a level of expectation and a level of performance that you have to meet. And I wonder if they would even feel comfortable just throwing a reserve side out. I don't think they would. So I think they'll find a way to manage the minutes and move forward. Then they get 12 days off. Then they come back into training for Champions League, and then it'll be straight into the next Bundesliga season.
I just have this vision of Liverpool like the Club World Cup side that showed up and having the side of the youngins just out there for one of these matches toward the end of it.
Doesn't do you any good just to throw a bunch of kids out there. You need to mix it. That's where you're going to get a benefit from it here. So you need to mix the guys who have been in your squad but haven't seen a whole bunch of minutes, maybe guys who are potentially going to be out of contract that you need to make a decision on. Mix some kids in, but don't just throw a bunch of kids out there because you're just setting them up to get beat and wreck their confidence. That's pointless. That's absolutely pointless. They didn't have a choice with FA Cup, with when the Club World Cup was going on, League Cup. They didn't have a choice. Now they have a choice. Mix it. Mix it a little bit. Bring on a kid at the 45-minute mark at halftime to replace Mo Salah. And he's playing with some other first-teamers. Then you can see what that kid really is. Otherwise, you're just writing names down on a sheet with no thought about what's going to come next. And Jurgen Klopp's not that guy. He's going to be thoughtful about this.
And Tafka says, that was part of his analysis. If there's a break-in matches coming for Bayern no matter what, then an extra week won't matter.
Yeah, it's weird. I really will be keeping an eye on Bayern in Champions League. I think they're going to struggle to find their rhythm, and other teams will have it, but Bayern will be fresh. And if they go in and they understand, look, we're not going to be as sharp, our passing might not be where we want it to be, but man, we can run all day, and these other teams are going to be tired. Maybe Bayern just amps the press up a little bit, and Hansi Flick has amped that up. And there was a good read that I saw on Twitter earlier this morning about how the press has worked for them. One element to it that I really like that I think he's nailed is a lot of times you see teams, not every team that presses does this, but a lot of them do, where you see them cut the field in half vertically. So if the ball moves to the right side of the opponent, it's on their right back, the team that is pressing will have all of their players on that side of the field to make it difficult, trying to force them into a big switch. But what Bayern does is they don't just do that and keep their straight lines. They kind of tilt it to where they're trying to like box you into a corner. They're trying to block you in. It's a little more nuanced, and I think they've done a really good job with that. Maybe it's just a little bit of luck as the way that's come out. Maybe it's the individual players who are kind of doing that. Maybe it's Hansi Flick working on it. I think it's more effective that way, because I've always felt like teams that just don't have the intensity of the press and just move everybody to the side of the field the ball is on, you can light that up if you have a big switch. You can light that up if you know it's coming. And I've seen a lot of teams in MLS and the way that they press, they try to do that. If you don't have the intensity of the press and you don't understand that we have to block that switch, it's easy to beat. And I think Atlanta's a team that's handled that pretty well. Teams who have tried to do that against Atlanta just starts pinging it side to side and opening the field up. Bayern's done a good job of pressing, cutting the field in half, but also boxing you in a little bit more. And maybe that's their counterpunch. Maybe in Champions League, that's their counterpunch. They know they're not going to be quite as sharp, but they know they're going to be fit, and they're going to run you into the ground because they think you're going to be tired.
So basically, it's almost like a pincher movement from the outside, where they press forward, but you have the action coming in from the side as well to pin you into a corner.
You just tilt it. It's not straight lines up and down the field. You just tilt it to where if the ball's on the right side of the opponent, on your left side, you're not in a straight line across the field. Your back line, your midfield, your right side of it is further advanced. So you're just pinning them in and turning it a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to visualize that as you're talking about it. So it's just turning it slightly and then pinning.
Magic of the mind, John.
Yes, I'm trying to work in 3 dimensions here with my hands and use it like a steering wheel.
Yeah, that's not it.
No. Where do you want to go next, sir?
I don't know. You tell me. Where do you want to start?
Well, we saw the stuff come out yesterday, I guess, about the NBA and where they're staying in Orlando, and how MLS players would like to have NBA players come and visit games and things like that. So the three hotels have come to the play now.
That's not the way it was worded. Keith Smith, who covers the NBA for Yahoo Sports, had a long set of tweets about the situation for the NBA in Orlando, and there was crossover with MLS. A couple elements from it that jumped out to me. This is from a Walt Disney World source of Keith Smith's. He said, when President Barack Obama visited Magic Kingdom in 2012, we had safety and security protocols unlike any we've had in our Florida history. We're bringing many of those back for the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex during the NBA MLS stay. So you're worried about security, you're getting a presidential level of security here pretty much. Also from a source, maybe a different source, maybe the same source, not sure. Our MLS partners have told us that they would love to have NBA players attend their games during their downtime. The NBA has not indicated if they will allow the same, but we think that is something that the two leagues may be able to work out. So they're all in the bubble together, and then you start to ask, well, are the bubbles the same?
Yeah.
Similar. Pretty much. They're the same. There was a lot of talk that the NBA players would be allowed to just go out in Orlando and hang out. No, that's not the case, according to ESPN today. They're not allowed to leave the campus. If they leave the campus and they come back, there is a self-quarantining period and all that. There is a snitch line for the NBA. If players are not breaking, or if they are breaking protocols, then people can call in anonymously and snitch on them. See how that goes once we get to the finals. Mm-hmm. The testing is similar. It's every other day. It could bump up to every day, depending on how their test results are going. A couple of things that the NBA had mentioned in this ESPN article that MLS has not had mentioned. Players will have the option to wear a proximity alarm that will notify them if they spend more than 5 seconds within 6 feet of another person on campus who is wearing an alarm. This is optional for players and possibly referees, mandatory for all team and league staff members. Players will also be allowed to wear a smart ring that could help with early detection of COVID-19. Tracks temperature, respiratory, and heart rate, among other measurements. Those are two things that I have not heard about. Why are you looking at your hands all strangely?
No, I was just trying to picture a smart ring.
It's a ring that's on your finger, like a ring would be.
Yeah.
We know how rings work.
Yeah.
The finger, the thing that you can put on your finger, and it'll give you your respiratory and your heart rate. So it's the same concept clamp of that, yeah. And it's going to track your temperature, and I mean it's pretty basic. It's just a ring instead of, putting a clamp on your finger. It's the same idea. The proximity alarm thing is weird. I think that maybe the 5 seconds within 6 feet of somebody is a little bit of overkill, but hey, if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. And I've seen the opposite side of this. Everybody has talked about the number of cases spiking in Florida as a whole, which I don't think is as relevant as Orlando and the county they're in. And that's not necessarily relevant if you're doing all of these things that both leagues are talking about doing. Now, another part that people have had questions about because of those numbers, Disney staff who are not NBA employees, who are not MLS employees, they won't be required to live inside the campus. This is on the NBA side anyway. They will be screened via symptoms, temperature checks when they show up. If they exhibit symptoms, they're not allowed to work. They are required to wear face coverings at all times and stay away from players as much as possible. Social distancing. That's what we do when we go to the store. That's what you're asking these employees to do when they are working. They are not going to be in situations where they're directly, working with people who are in the bubble. They're going to be in the bubble, but they're not spending time with people in the bubble. And I think another element that maybe needs to be updated here when you have this conversation is the CDC and most of the major experts have really backed off of the idea that this can be transmitted on surfaces easily. Yeah. Initially, that was a huge fear. Now that's not very likely at all. Anything can happen. I mean, if I, sneeze all over a counter and then you come up 5 minutes later, okay, that's a different conversation. But you would think, just using common sense, if somebody sneezes all over a counter, there's going to be a lot of cleaning done before anybody else comes up to put their hands on the counter.
Yes.
And also, there's going to be the idea, because this is how I am when I go to the store, I'm trying to touch as few things as possible because I can't control my environment. Mm-hmm. Now, I do wonder if the Disney staff would potentially wear the proximity alarm thing, and maybe that's a good way to deal with them in contact with people who are in the bubble. But I think it's realistic. I think this is all possible. And I think when people just point to, there's a bunch of positive tests in Florida. Well, Florida's a big place. Orlando is where the players are going to be. Let's nail it down there. The numbers, I've not seen updated numbers specifically in that county, and John will start Googling away because I know how he does.
Yep.
The last time we saw it, it was a record on Friday, and it was 128, and the county, and that's new positive tests. Another thing that another number I think people are throwing around without context that you need to be a little careful about is the total number of positives that a state or area has had. Somebody who tested positive at the beginning of March, it's a different conversation than somebody who tested positive a week ago. I think we need a little more breakdown there. Active cases, if that's possible, or positive tests within the last month, because that's what you're maybe a little more likely of transmission. You could probably even dial that down a little bit more, because positives from 2-3 months ago are not relevant anymore, right? I mean, am I incorrect in thinking that?
I don't think so, no.
I don't know. I don't know, but I think just saying a million positive tests, well, give me an idea of when these are happening. Because if most of them have been dealt with, then okay, those should be antibodies now, and that's actually a good thing in the situation as opposed to a bad thing. So more context when we talk about these things. It's very, very important. Do you have any updated numbers on our county in Orlando? What's the county?
Orange
County.
Yeah, apparently new cases spiked up 1,000 yesterday from 1758 to 2783.
So wait a minute. They had 1,000 more positive tests yesterday? Because it was 128 new ones on Friday.
Yeah. And so it went up 1,025 from June 15 to June 16.
So it went up June 15 to June 16. So it went from having 128 positive tests on Friday, right?
Yes. So it was what's Friday? Going backwards? Was it the 14th?
I just want to make sure you're not looking at a total number as opposed to how many new cases you had in a day.
Yeah, I'm using subtraction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So say that one more time to make it clear.
It went from 1758 daily cases on June 15th to 2783 June 16th. So it was an increase of 1,025 from June 15 to June 16.
So that's absolutely significant, and that's absolutely something that these leagues have to be careful about. You are, again, talking about testing every other day. You are, again, talking about these players not leaving the campus, and you might want to share these numbers with Bill Hamid because he might need to know this. Mm-hmm. You got to be careful. I mean, there's nothing that I think anybody has said about, it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter as much as some have tried to portray it. Now, the question is going to be the staff, and that's the element that is outside of the league's control. And that's the element that you start thinking about with this. If the positive number of tests, and the other question I would have would be, how many more tests were done in that period of time, too? Right. Is it just an increase in testing, or is it about the same number of tests and you're getting more positives? That's worrisome. And this is happening in different parts of the country. But we have to understand the differences between the conversation. That type of bump would terrify me about having a large crowd. It's impossible. You can't do that. But you're not trying to do that. You're not having the players just hang out in the community. So those numbers shouldn't affect the players and the staff and the league staff in the bubble. The way it can is from the hotel staff, the Disney staff. Now, this goes back to Burns' point last week about what hotels are doing in Germany and in other countries as well. They're doing their own testing. It's their employees. And if MLS and the NBA maybe need to make a contribution to do that testing, I think that would be the solution to this. That would make you feel better about those numbers jumping up with people who are going out into the community. Now, again, these people are not hanging out with the players. They are going to be wearing face coverings, which protects the players from them. They're going to be screened. They're going to do the temperature checks. Look, if you got to pony up the testing to make it even more safe, do it. Do it. That's the question now. So that's a big jump. That is a big jump, and that's a concern. But you have a bubble for a reason. You have the testing level you're doing for the players for a reason. You are keeping them away from the staff for a reason. You're bringing in all this different entertainment they're talking about doing for a reason. You're not having the players hang out in the community that has that big jump. They're hanging out in their own community that they made themselves, and they're quarantining in it. Playing sports in that community, in that bubble community, it doesn't make a difference what they're doing in it because they're being protected. It's like a large household. You know, when we started with all this, and it was, you can only go out and sit at a place with members of your household. Well, this is a very, very large household. And that's the way it's set up. But if you have to worry about it for the Disney staff, then that's a different conversation. And I think you need to start thinking about solutions.
Heading back to news in Europe, can we get a breaking news, developing news sounder, please?
Well, that's two different things. Pick one.
Breaking news. Why not?
Breaking news. Okay, because that's very clearly this one.
Mark Ogden, ESPN FC, and others. Lisbon will host the season's Champions League final in August after UEFA confirmed the final stages of the 1920 competition will be held in the Portuguese capital rather than Istanbul as originally planned. Following a meeting of UEFA's Executive Committee on Wednesday, it has also been announced the Champions League will be completed as a mini competition from the quarterfinal onwards, with Benfica's Estadio da Luz and Sporting's Estadio José Alvalade being used to stage the games.
Whole bunch of stuff. Dale Johnson, ESPN, this is your source for all the breakdown of everything from UEFA. Gracias, Johannes. All the things John said, everything's in Lisbon, straight knockout from the quarterfinal on round of 16, August 7th and 8th. Venues to be determined at home or in Portugal. Istanbul will now host next year's Champions League final. St. Petersburg in 2022, Munich in 23, Wembley in 24. Europa League quarters, semis, final held in Germany, final in Cologne. Round of 16, locations to be determined. Second leg matches, if the second leg matches are at the home team or in Germany. Not sure yet. One-legged tie for matches that have not started. That's an interesting one with Europa League. So if it hasn't started, they're only playing one leg. If it started, they're playing two legs. Not ideal, but I don't know what else you do. Gdansk will host the 2021 Europa League final. Sevilla will host 22. Budapest in 23. Squads. Teams can add 3 new players to their squads for the remaining games, but they have to already be registered. New signings cannot play. Timo Werner, Ziyech. So Chelsea can't put together a team of new signings to try to overturn that lead that Bayern has. New signings can't play, but you can add players that you didn't already put on your squad that are part of your club. 5 subs will be allowed. UEFA Super Cup will be played in Budapest on September 24th. National associations must put forward teams for European competition for next year by August 3rd. So I guess that's changed a little bit from that idea of the top 15 countries had till August 3rd and the others had till early July or mid-July. Now it's everybody August 3rd. Qualifying rounds for next year. 1 leg, not 2. Other than the final qualifying round, which is 2. Group stage for Champions League, October 20, October 21. Okay, the Euro 2020, which is now in 2021, which is still going to be called Euro 2020, will be confused next summer. All original venues can host, so the match schedule still the same. Playoffs to get in, October 8 and November 12 as part of triple header internationals. You're going to play 3 games in an international window in October and November. Keep that in mind when we talk about scheduling for MLS and leagues on this side of the ocean. Nations League will go ahead on the original international breaks, and they are planning to play in September. 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8 of September. October 10th and 11th, and October 13th and 14th. And November 14th, 15th, and 17th and 18th. So that's the 2 legs, the two games in these Nations League matchups. Now, remember those playoffs to get into Euro 2020. You could have teams be playing 3 games in that international break. One of them, well, you're going to have teams play 3 games in 2 international breaks, because one of them will be a playoff to get into Euro 2020 next summer. The other 2 will be Nations League games for the current competition. A lot of stuff. Lots and lots of stuff. You got questions about it, throw them our way, but make sure you're following Dale Johnson, ESPN, because he gets everything nailed down and he answers a bunch of questions. Not surprised with some of this stuff. Oh, a little more on Champions League. Final 8 straight knockout tournament at Benfica Sporting for 12th and 13th of August 2020. Quarterfinals will be played on the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. Semifinals, 18th and 19th. Final, August 23rd. And they do have venues if round of 16 home teams can't host their second leg. If they can't host it in their country, they can be played at Porto and Guimarães in Portugal. So, have plenty to talk about there. No major surprises, I guess, when you get down to it. The squad thing, I didn't see them at all allowing Timo Werner to switch teams in the competition or Ziyech to switch teams in the competition. They were already essentially cup-tied. So that wasn't going to happen. Other signings, like if you sign somebody from your domestic league for next season, you can't go ahead and put them in here. Keep that in mind with the French, for example, who have that domestic window open. They can't add players and then play them in this season's European competition. So, and that makes sense. Logically, that's the right call. So you have the roadmap now. You have the roadmap for a lot of things. The Champions League and Europa League, what it looks like starting next season's competitions, Euro 2020 playoffs and the competition next summer, and the Nations League is going to continue. But those international windows in September, October, November, that doesn't happen if FIFA doesn't give you the sign-off. Keep that in mind when we're talking about MLS scheduling. It's going to get complicated. Across the board, it's going to get really complicated because you've got leagues like MLS, you've got leagues in this hemisphere that are going to be trying to get as many games in as possible, and they're going to lose time with those international windows, or they're going to play through them, and then you're going to have squads that are not at full strength with any players who do go to Europe, or, CONMEBOL has said they're not playing the September dates, but they're still planning on October and November. And if UEFA has already opened up that door to playing 3 games in those dates, it's going to be hard with a lot of South American players playing in MLS. It's also going to be hard for CONCACAF. And let's go back to that rumor that popped off earlier this week that the member nations had turned down the idea of 3 groups of 4, which would have been shorter number of games. They're going for more games than the Hex. They're going for a group of 8.
The octagonal.
The octagonal, which would be 14 games. Well, again, if UEFA's opening up the door to doing triple header international weeks, CONCACAF's going to see that door open and they might kick it down. And then that's another complication for the domestic league because U.S. national team players, Canadian national team players, because they would be part of it, Mexican national team players, Honduran national team players. You're going to have a lot of challenges. Costa Rican national team players, along with Curacao would be in this as well. Eloy Room for Columbus. You would have a lot of problems with triple international match weeks on top of a compressed league schedule already. That's going to be very difficult to manage. CONCACAF has not announced anything. CONMEBOL has not announced anything. But when you see one do it, that opens up the door for you to do it because they need to get these games in.
Yeah. So what you're basically telling me is to get my Google Calendar and or my dry erase board figured out for the rest of this year and for 2021 because there's going to be a lot of business picking up.
Yeah, I mean, across the board. It's going to be madness everywhere. More madness in Italy. Nick's excited about this, I think.
Yes.
Matteo Benetti. You're excited about this for some reason. Matteo Benetti of ESPN says, according to Sky Germany and Mediaset, Ralf Rangnick is very close to signing a 3-year deal to become Milan's new manager. That's a big difference in playing style. That is the most Red Bull press of the Red Bull press. This is the originator of the Red Bull press. It's not really how Milan's ever played. It's not really how anybody in Italy plays. Is that going to help them? Maybe some. But you're going to have to completely change the squad, and you're going to have to do that with not a whole lot of resources to do it in terms of cash. But you can teach people how to press, and that's one of the reasons why clubs do it, because you can not spend as much and still get good results. But it doesn't happen overnight, especially with a squad that is not built to press. This is going to be a petri dish of a tactical experiment, and I have no idea how it's going to go.
I was going to ask about this year one. Is it just one where I want to see? I want to see who's in. I want to see who's out. I want to see who stays. It's a fantastic soap opera if this comes to pass with Ragnick.
Well, they're saying it's going to come to pass. We're past the maybe if, and I mean, it's getting reported that it's 3-year deal. So I think
and when Nick sends you a note and it's in all caps and it's extended, that's why I was excited, because I saw Nick and all of these capital letters and a big run-on sentence, and I'm like, okay, this will be fun.
I'll tell you why I'm not excited. I don't like teams that could do something else who decide to play this way. I don't enjoy this way of playing. It's not the beautiful game to me. It's not the kind of soccer I enjoy. It's not what I like. Milan, I thought, was a club that wouldn't do something like that. I get it for a Red Bull Salzburg. I get it for a Leipzig who is trying to bridge a gap here. Leipzig's shown you what it can do, even with top players involved. Bernd Dursberger says Zlatan on a pressing team. No Zlatan. Yeah. Zlatan's gone. He'll go back to Hammarby, where he owns part of the team, and
go to Monza
for a little bit. Maybe. We'll see how that goes in Serie B, where Berlusconi's talking about signing Kaká out of retirement to bring him in to play in Serie B and watch him get punted into the top row of the stands. I don't know. I don't know. I don't enjoy it. It's not the way that I enjoy to watch the game. It can be successful. I think it has a low ceiling of how successful it can be. I don't know. I don't like it. And I don't think Nick's going to like it after 5 games.
Yeah, okay. No, I said from the soap opera transitional element. That's what I was talking about.
Well, you always just want chaos no matter what it means. I actually worry about the meaning chaos here. But I worry about the meaning. Team chaos is not always a good thing. This is bad for a club in Milan that has been known as playing a classy style and being a classy team to do this, which is a gimmick to me. It's the basketball team that's not good enough, that has to play a full court press in college because they don't have players who are good enough to play in a normal game. It's the crazy weird
is
spread.
Is this Loyola Marymount?
It's kind of. I mean, it's just exaggerated because you're trying to make up for a lack of talent. And Milan's never been that club. Maybe they are now. Maybe I'm just playing off of the history and thinking they're something that they're not anymore. But this completely seals it. They're not that anymore. They are your typical mid-tier, lower-tier team now that is looking for a gimmick to compete. And it's a sad day. If you think back to the days of Baresi and Maldini and the Dutch trio came in with Van Basten and Rijkaard and Hullet, and now you're going to play this? Not a fan. Not a fan at all. I don't like it. All right, John, you have to tell us about Mr. Steve Apolinski right now.
I can do that. Apolinski and Associates, LLC, proud supporters of Soccer Down Here and everything attached to the SDH network. Wrongful death and serious injury cases in Georgia and Alabama. How do you get in touch with them? Steve, S-D-E-V-E at aa-legal.com. You can fire off an email or give them a buzz and get a consultation for 437-7919. Or go to the website, aa-legal.com. You can show up there, low right-hand 24/7, 365. It's a pop-up window. And if you have questions that you need to have answered instantaneously, go to the pop-up window, start your conversation right there. A couple different ways to catch up with someone who has a firm that is rated top in the state. Legal Alert, Georgia Trend Magazine. Mike, help me out here with the tag. It's aa-legal.com.
I don't know if this was a technical problem on my end, but I was hearing a lot of music there.
Yeah, it was getting out of whack. It's a technical problem on my end. I've realized that, one, I can't play the music where John can hear it because it affects the quality of his performance.
I'm trying to read in time with the music.
Yeah, it's not as good, so I'm just gonna have to play it in the background so you can't hear it and know it's there.
Understood. That's why I got a little thrown off. Hopefully Friday my My assistants will be more handy for you.
And Chris Ashley wants to start a GoFundMe for John's internet, which I think is probably a good call.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
dodgy.
John just needs a backup. Some kind of satellite or cellular-based backup.
That's a good call.
Well, you know what they could do is that particular firm could be a sponsor of the network, and that could help us all.
Yeah.
Well, and just having things like that, Mike, I actually learned about this thing called an Ethernet cable.
Yeah,
I mean, I was using those in college almost 25 years ago, but I guess they still work.
Apparently so. I'm waiting until 42 minutes from now when my signal traditionally dumps here inside Office HD, and so we have the Ethernet cable plugged in today as opposed to using the home Wi-Fi at Office HD.
I told John, use the Ethernet cable. Why don't you get wired in so you're not relying on a Wi-Fi? Huh?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, when we go on the road and do games, we can't do them without an Ethernet cable. Wi-Fi is not even an option for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go to
except
places
in
and they'll be
Dallas,
like,
where the Ethernet cable's no good either.
Well, don't get me started on that. but no, they'll be like, yeah, we have Wi-Fi. We have great Wi-Fi. Come on in and use it. No, we can't do that. We need to have an Ethernet cable because otherwise we would drop out all the time. So
John knows all about that.
Yes,
I hope that, I guess now 41 minutes from now, that your Ethernet cable comes through in the clutch for you.
We'll see.
Oh, we will see. Let's talk about this. So the NBA plan, more details are coming out about what things look like in Orlando, and there's a lot of similarities with MLS. A couple things that jumped out to me that were a little different were these proximity alarms and the smart rings that they're talking about. Which, hey, it's bonus.
Get me one of these smart rings, man.
We did talk about this, Mike, and I want to get your take on it. The numbers in the county in Orlando have jumped dramatically in the last couple of days. It was about 128 new positives on Friday. It was over 1,000 new positives from the numbers John found yesterday. Which is a big change. Now, these players aren't hanging out in the county, and the NBA players are also not allowed to leave the campus, and we'll see how that goes over. Are you concerned? Are you worried? Do you think the protocols are good enough? Do you think they're being forward-thinking about all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it really matters where you go as long as everyone adheres to the protocols and they don't do anything reckless in leaving the bubble. It really should not matter where you are going. And this is something that Don Garber was peppered with last Wednesday when the case numbers were, I guess, much lower than they are now.
Yeah.
Don Garber seemed pretty steadfast that his players and MLS staff and everyone who's going to be in the bubble will not be in close enough contact with any hotel employee or Disney employee that would put them at risk of contracting the virus. He did make a comment about how no one's going to be close enough to a bus driver to be at risk. That seems a little cloudy to me. I'm not quite sure how that's the case, but
I'll tell you how it could
unless
be.
You go out of mid-door.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Either
that's
depending
true.
on the bus, or if it's like one of the airport kind of 15 passenger buses, you
Yeah.
can go out the back door.
Yeah, that's true. You could do that. So, I mean, there would be a good example.
I think MARTA's doing that actually right now. I think they're not having you enter near the driver. You're entering in the back.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm sure, the drivers will be wearing masks. But
Also true.
Yeah, his whole point was, when your room is being cleaned, you're not coming into direct contact with the housekeeper. When you're getting food, in theory, they're going to have it set up in such a way where you're not going to have contact with, hotel staff. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like or how that's going to look. But, it sounds like they have taken enough precautions where, there could be a full-fledged outbreak in Orange County, Florida. And as long as everyone is staying in the bubble and doing what they're supposed to be doing, the risk of that impacting the bubble is very, very minimal. So, no, I don't have a concern. Again, I think my overarching thought from day one has been that I would rather see these matches played in home markets like they're doing in Germany and England and Italy and Spain and all of that. But this is what was developing back in April when it sounded like the bubble theory was the only way to get this done. And so here we are. But no, I'm not worried about it at all. I think what we have found, guys, is the protocols work. And I know that there's been a lot of robust reporting about, the disaster at the University of Houston where they decided to not test anyone.
Don't get us started on SMU either.
You have colleges that have decided, let's not test anyone and see what happens, and then you have outbreaks there.
That's shocking.
Let's see what happens. That's always a good strategy.
For as much correct, justifiable reporting as there has been on those situations, there has not been very robust reporting on how NASCAR has been going for more than a month with no problem. Mm-hmm. There hasn't been very robust reporting on the PGA Tour testing 500 people at Texas last week and getting not a single positive. There has been some reporting, but not very robust, about how in Germany and England and Spain, the protocols have worked and there have not been outbreaks there. So that's the message. The protocols work, and I am sensitive to what's happening in the Orlando area. But if everyone does what they're supposed to be doing, it should not matter.
Yeah, I come back to the place that it can matter is the Disney staff. And do you maybe need to figure out some different things, or Disney needs to figure out some different things? I mean, some hotels around the world are requiring testing of their employees. That's just part of the job right now. You could look at that, but it doesn't affect the players. It doesn't affect the team staff. It doesn't affect that world because that's a separate world. It's a separate world with the testing, and with nobody leaving that world, they're good. And I'm with you on the reporting and how it can mislead. That was my issue on the college side is you've got some of these college programs that are acting recklessly. That should show you that MLS, the NBA, Bundesliga, Premier League, Serie A, La Liga are doing it the right way. It's not about you can't do sports. It's about you have to do it the right way. And if you don't follow those protocols, you're just being willfully ignorant.
Yeah, and I think you could even make the argument that MLS and the NBA and WNBA and NWSL, they may even be more cautious than they need to be quite honest with you. Because the protocol is at such a point where teams are going to be in bubbles. I'm still not sure if it's been proven that the bubble is the safest way to do it. And
I honestly don't know if it's about safety for the bubble. I think it's about not being able to guarantee that every team can play in their market. I don't know if you can do that right now. Even now, I think it's a lot closer.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think it's safety. I think it's that. I think it's all about you have to play the season, and not everybody can host.
Yeah. Well, and as a side effect of that, and you're right, Jason, that's a very good point. I mean, we don't have those issues in say, Germany because, what the Bundesliga is doing is pretty much a federalized program as opposed to state by state. So that is absolutely true. But I think that's been my big message. And I know that there's been a lot of eagerness to report when player X with team Y tests positive in their home market. Again, we'll take the two cases of Dallas and DC. We have not had outbreaks. We have
Dallas,
not had
the players
outbreaks.
Back too.
Exactly. So again, that's what I want to stress to everyone is these protocols work.
Yep.
They work. And I'm very encouraged by that. And that's why, with things going the way they're going in Orlando, I really don't worry about it. Because what's been put in place, as long as it's adhered to, should work. And we have evidence of it working with organizing bodies in this country already. With, as I said, NASCAR and the PGA Tour. UFC, they had one person come in positive for their first event. They've had more than a month's worth of events since. No outbreaks. all these boxing cards that you see on ESPN. You'll hear of someone coming in and testing positive, and they'll isolate them. No outbreaks. IndyCar's had an event in Texas. No outbreaks because the system works. And I'll give you another example. You've seen how cases have been spiking in South Carolina. That's one you hear about a lot. NASCAR had 2 events in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. No outbreaks because the protocols work. IndyCar went to Texas. You're hearing a lot about how Texas is having problems now. No outbreak, and PGA Tour for that matter. Yeah. They were in Texas.
Thank you.
Look at this. This is...
Sorry.
I don't know what
I
that
pulled
was.
a John.
No outbreaks because everything is working.
Mike, I mean, I would much rather, in this current environment, I would much rather go to all the way to the end, be over prepared and over secure, and work my way backwards instead of being SMU, where it's just like, we'll just you know.
I mean, the SMU Houston thing, that's awful. That's malpractice. And if you're in a position as an athletic department where you cannot afford the testing infrastructure, then you shouldn't be working out. You shouldn't be playing.
Nope.
You have a responsibility to your student, and that's what really makes me angry. Not only have they failed their responsibility to their student athletes, but now they have unnecessarily created this new question or idea that what we're trying to do with very strict, widely approved and endorsed protocols in place could somehow not be safe. Mm-hmm. And it creates an unnecessary set of questions about the viability of what MLS or the NBA and NHL and whoever else is doing. That really annoys me. It's because you had athletic departments of certain schools be irresponsible. And I think that's really, really, really unfortunate. It is fortunate that Major League Soccer is not running this the way that SMU and Houston were running their workouts. But I think that's something that really needs to be stressed. And the other thing, too, and look, I'm not an expert. I haven't done a lot of reporting on these numbers. But one of the things I've been reading about Florida is you're starting to see nursing homes, prisons, backlog tests, a lot of things start to come into the numbers that are being presented in the last week or two. And Florida's hospitalizations are not necessarily rising at the same rate as these positive cases.
I think Arizona is one that you're seeing the hospitalizations go up too, and that's a different conversation.
You're not really seeing that in Florida as far as I know, as far as I've been told. So I think we just need to make sure we have all the facts. And as Don Garber was asked about this last week when cases were starting to spike, and I can't disagree with what he said. He said, we're watching it, we're aware of it, but the numbers in Florida are still not to the point where they are in other places. And I have no reason to believe that he's being dishonest about that. So, look, this is where we are, and I think it was expected that there were going to be some I don't even know if I want to call it spikes, just some upticks in cases because states are opening up, people are getting out. We've obviously had a slew of mass gatherings across the country, which, by the way, have not been tied to any significant outbreaks so far, which I think is significant. We're more than 2 weeks beyond a lot of that. I think that's very important. So I'm confident that the league has this figured out to do it in the safest way possible. I really, really am.
Here's another one that people will go nuts about. I can guarantee it. I'm surprised I haven't seen it yet on Twitter. Orlando International Airport tested nearly 500 employees. 260 tested positive. Mm-hmm. Now, you hear that and you're like, oh, they got to fly in. But anybody who flies, you fly in, you're flying in on a charter because they're flying to Orlando on a charter. That was part of the deal.
Right.
You're not interfacing with
with the general population
employees. You're getting off the plane and onto a bus and you're going to the hotel.
And we can speak to that from experience, Jason, because we've both been on charters. You do not interact with there are
when you arrive,
security people. There are a few security. You're right. When you arrive, not when you when you arrive at the charter terminal. So this would not really apply to anyone going into Orlando. You will interact with a few security people leaving.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm sure the league could easily set up a testing protocol on. But you're right. I mean, it is airline. I think the guy who offloads the bags is on the plane with you, if I remember correctly.
I think the way we've done it, yeah.
Yeah, and look, okay, if Orlando International Airport is having a problem, guess what? Fly into Orlando Sanford. They have another international airport in Orlando through which teams can fly.
The only one I could see this being an issue for, and I saw that the NBA had created something a little different for the Raptors, is Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver. And I don't know what the process is for them, or if they're going to come in early and train separate, because the Raptors are going to be at Florida Gulf Coast, right?
Yeah, yes. Vancouver is training in their home market. The National Hockey League has been trying very, very hard to get the Canadian government to waive their 2-week quarantine policy so they can have a hub in Toronto for all the Eastern Conference cities to play out the season. And it was my understanding as of yesterday they have gotten that approval.
To come into Canada.
Yes, to come into Canada.
Do we have it the other way? If you're coming from Canada, is there a 14-day quarantine? Okay.
No. It's not a quarantine. The issue was the border being closed, but the Department of Homeland Security declared professional sports to be essential. So the border is open to pro sports. Now, to your point, I don't know what Orlando, Montreal, and I'm sorry, not Orlando. I don't know what Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto are planning to do, but I do know Vancouver is training in its home market right now. So
all of them are. I think they're all training, but Toronto, I remember in the ESPN article about the NBA, the Raptors are going early to Florida, and they're going to do a camp at Florida Gulf Coast. And I think part of the reason why was because they have players who are not in Canada. They would have to come to Canada, do a quarantine, and then come here, and they're just going to go to Florida Gulf Coast University instead.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the NBA is going to be having a tour, well, longer than that, a 4-week training camp before their play restarts. So, yeah, I mean, these are all legit.
You can figure that out.
I think Brad Guzan even talked about this last Thursday, how that was a question that was brought up by the players to the league, what's going to happen with this quarantine thing. And the league assured the players that it would be worked out by the time it became relevant. So that's basically what we know. We have seen, like I said, in the case of the National Hockey League, and I think we're starting to see it now with Formula One and some other things in Europe, that there is more flexibility on the 2-week quarantine policy of a lot of these countries when they open their borders back up. And again, it would seem that if there's enough testing capacity, and again, this is not an issue for Canadian teams coming into the U.S., but for U.S. teams going into Canada, or for Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver to return to Canada, they're playing lands and you test them right there on the tarmac. And if you test negative, you go home, and if you test positive, you go into isolation. That would seem to be something that could be worked out pretty quickly without a tremendous amount of expense.
Yeah, I think to add, just so people kind of understand the protocols here and the level of importance, and MLS and the NBA are on the same page with this one. When people arrive in Orlando, they are going through the same type of testing that they did when they started to train again. It's 2 tests in a 72-hour period, 24 hours apart. You have to pass both to be able to train. And I think the NBA one, when they arrive, they're going to their hotel room. They're staying in their hotel room until they pass 2 tests and they're good to go. Then they can start to interact. That's another key. It's not just show up and YOLO, let's do it Houston style and just see what happens. It's no, there's a ton of protocol here, and I'm already seeing it. Like, well, who's going to drive the bus for these teams who arrive? I mean, again, you're not hanging out with the bus driver. I've never sat next to a bus driver and hung out with him for the whole bus ride. It doesn't happen. Let's be realistic here with what's going on. Concerns are real, but you have protocols to deal with those concerns.
And again, the bus driver is something that has been specifically addressed. And look, I know there are lots of questions and concerns about safety, and I totally get it. Those are all very fair, valid questions, but I think we need to look at the bigger picture here, that, again, these protocols that are probably more strict than is what has been implemented elsewhere, these protocols work. They work. They've worked in NASCAR. They've worked so far with the PGA Tour. They've worked with UFC. They've worked with IndyCar. They've worked with everything in Europe that's gotten started so far. They work. And I know it could be tough to ask people to take a leap of faith when we're talking about something as serious as this, but I don't know. I think I've seen enough evidence that what they're going to have in place so far has worked. Mm-hmm. Again, I think the big fallacy in this whole bubble concept and putting everyone in the same hotel complex is you do enhance the chances of an outbreak with everyone under one roof. That's where I think the NBA has been smart, and I know why they're doing it this way, and it's probably not because of safety, but the NBA is smart. They're using 3 hotels in 3 completely different areas of the park. So 1/3 of the teams, if God forbid there is a problem at one hotel, 2/3 of the league are firewall. I wish MLS would have done it that way, but I understand that there are other, elements in play to all of that, and this is what we have. And you still have teams, I guess, in 2 separate buildings connected by a swimming pool and a couple other things. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I really do believe, I hate to use the expression leap of faith because I know that's something the players have been upset about, but if I were asked to take a leap of faith and go into this bubble, I would have no concerns in doing so because everything I've seen so far proves to me that it works.
Because if you have that empirical evidence in front of you and you continue to exhibit the habits that you've used for this entire 3-month period, it makes sense that if you continue to do what you're doing to take care of yourself and take care of those around you, in addition to the protocols that are being put in place to help you in that second level, then yes, while it is a leap of faith, those safeguards are there for you to make sure that you can do your job.
Yeah. Now, is it going to be easy? No. And I thought Nikki Collin, the head coach of the Atlanta Dream, had a really, really insightful comment yesterday. She did a press conference because the WNBA is restarting, and they're going down to IMG in Bradenton, where actually Atlanta United had a training camp this year. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about, we could be in a studio apartment for 90 days. She said there is a huge mental health component to all of this.
Yeah.
That's going to have to be addressed because you're talking about being away from family and loved ones for 90 days, and there have to be things in place to deal with the mental health issues that will come with that. And I hope that's something that both MLS and the NBA have considered, and it seems like going through these NBA documents that there are things in place to help from a morale standpoint. But that is something I do get concerned about.
I think that's why MLS cut theirs down to be at 30 plus days. Teams do that in preseason. Yeah. That's a typical kind of training camp. Now you're playing games count instead of just a training camp, but that's a little more reasonable. Yeah, for the teams that go to the NBA Finals, for the WNBA teams, 3 months, that's a long time.
It is, and it's not the same for MLS, but who's to say that 21 days into this experience, and for teams like San Jose and some of the others who are going to have to go next week, a week from today, for training camp, if you're 21, 28 days into this and you just want to go out and, get out of the bubble, which you're not allowed to do, but it's going to take a lot of mental strength to maintain the integrity of the bubble. And I think the other thing that concerns me is if God forbid, again, there would be a slight problem with a couple people getting sick here or there, would you have players deciding independently that the bubble is no longer safe and they would leave and they want to be allowed to come back in? I don't know. I think the ring idea that the NBA is doing is pretty intriguing.
Yeah,
and I would love, and I would love to see if it proves itself to work, because I think that's actually something that could be implemented pretty easily for all of us, not just athletes.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, again, we're talking about a ring that would measure certain vital signs and give the wearer of the ring an indication that maybe they would be at higher risk of a problem with COVID. As
think
opposed
about
to,
it like the and I always forget what the thing's
almost
called. Kind of. It's like a Fitbit version of the clamp that you put on your finger to get your heart rate, to get your oxygen level. It's that just as a ring. I mean, it makes total sense in a situation like this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there are going to be, I think, some elements of this that we're going to be able to apply to broader society. But I just hope that, it looks like the NBA has been very proactive about it. I hope that MLS is considering these mental health questions, because they are significant. And they would be a big, big concern for me if I was going down there for 35 to 50 days.
I'm already seeing the people talk about the airport, and you just have to know what that process is like. When you're flying in on a charter, you are not like flying into Orlando International on its own,
population,
going through baggage claim and all that. You're not. Like, the bus will come get you at the plane, and you will go. It's just...
Well, look, I have flown charter into Orlando twice in the last 6 months. Less than that, with the Hawks. Okay? Here's how it works. I'll tell you exactly how it works.
Yeah, because I have not flown charter into Orlando. What's the Orlando process?
Yes.
You land, you go to the charter terminal, which is probably, as the crow flies, a mile away from the main terminal. It's off a side road, very, very far away from the main terminal. There is a yellow bus operated by Mears. Everyone who's been to Orlando knows about Mears taxis and Mears coaches, because they have everything there. The bus pulls up to the stairs. You walk right onto the bus. They close the door. They drive you to your hotel. They do bring a baggage conveyor up to the plane. The team equipment personnel pull the bags off the plane, load it into a truck. The truck drives separately to the hotel. You do not interface with a single airport staffer, not one. You do see a bus driver. I'm sure there could be a plexiglass shield between the bus driver and the door, if that's something that's a big concern. You don't come remotely close to anyone from Orlando until the bus drops you off at the hotel. And even then, when you get off the bus at the hotel, your room key is on a table with a bottle of water. You take your room key, you wait for the baggage truck to pull up, you pull your bag off the truck, you're on the elevator and up in your room. You don't have to leave your room again until you go to the game if you don't want. So that's how it works in Orlando. I can tell you from experience, and I've flown to just about every NBA city with the Hawks. Jason, you and I have flown charter to some MLS cities. The only time when you interface with an airport employee is if you have to go through customs.
Right.
Okay? That would be a concern for Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, but I think you can pre-clear in those cities. So in fact, I know you can, because when we fly with the Hawks from Toronto back to Atlanta, we do customs in Toronto. When we flew from Mexico, we did customs in Atlanta. But from Toronto, we do the customs in Toronto. You go through, you pre-clear, you can get whatever you want at duty-free, which is awesome, and you walk through the terminal and onto the plane. So even those Canadian teams, I know they have pre-clear in Montreal. We've done it there. I know they have it in Toronto. We've done it there. I don't know about Vancouver. But again, even the Canadian team should be able to do customs in their home city. So I know these are concerns that are going to be reported on because we have a very invested group of media who wants to report on all elements of all of this. But Jason, you're 100% right. And I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses or anything like that. That's just the reality of how it works. Yep. If you get off a charter airplane at the Orlando airport, you will not come into contact with anyone other than the bus driver. Period.
And that has to be out there. Like, that's the thing. And I understand if I didn't flown a ton of charter flights before doing this, so I didn't know. But that's the reality. And before you send out a thing like, oh no, MLS is going to fly into the airport, you have to understand what that process truly is. It's just like you said about the college programs. You have to understand, and it's something that I've tried really hard to point out, the differences in what they are doing versus what MLS is doing, what the NWSL is doing, what the Bundesliga has done. If you follow these protocols that are vetted, that are very detailed, that have as many checks in them as you possibly can for anything that can happen that's outside of your control, if you're following that, you can take care of these players and everything can be okay. And then let's take it to the next step where everybody said, like, you know, one positive test, oh no, and people are still, you know, touting that line. Go back and look in the Premier League. You had the situation where they're playing friendly matches behind closed doors. They've done some. And you had one where, correct me if I'm right, if I'm wrong here, John, you had a player from a championship team who tested positive and played in a behind closed doors match, and they tested everybody else and no other positives resulted from it.
Right.
Because, and England has done this with their medical experts, Italy has done this, Germany has done this. When you get into, okay, you have a game, you have a match, and basketball, it's a smaller space, it's less players, but it's the same kind of thing. You're not standing next to a opponent or a teammate for this extended period of time where your risk factor goes up dramatically.
Well, that is so key. And I was reading an article about that just today. And I think it was on CNBC. I can't remember, and I can't remember who the source was. I think it was the WHO, which, you know, again, they've been rather dubious through all of this. But they basically said that your greatest chance of getting infected is to have prolonged close contact with an infected person.
Right.
The evidence shows that if you have a fleeting encounter with someone who is infected, you still obviously have a chance, but the chances are dramatically reduced.
There's a difference between the graphics that were put out early on in this of an office or of a restaurant. That's not what an athletic competition looks like. It's not people sitting in a place for 30 minutes.
Folks had even monitored the Bundesliga and found out that contact had even decreased by 30% less time, even with the new rules of engagement on the field through practices.
You're not doing the walkouts. You're not doing all those kinds of things where that would be where it's at its highest.
Yeah. I just wish that, you know, again, I'm going to say it for like the fifth time, and I apologize, guys.
Nothing wrong with that.
I've given you a list of examples of where it has worked. Why aren't we concentrating on that, or at least even mentioning that when bringing up the problem that they're having in Orlando right now? I don't understand. Well, I do understand, but I don't agree with it. It's just, we have evidence it works. It's not like MLS came up with these protocols on their own without any consultation with any kind of experts. Everyone has signed off on this. Health officials have signed off on this. And you know, let's go back to how this conversation started. There's been an uptick in cases in Orange County. Well, now you're telling me that you have 250 cases at the airport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, out of what, 1,000 new cases reported. So this is what's going on, guys. You have these clusters. Just because there's a problem at the airport, or there's a problem at a nursing home, or a problem at a prison, or a problem at a factory, does not mean it's a problem countywide. We even saw that here in Georgia.
Right.
Hall County had a real problem with a poultry plant.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the singular problem. There wasn't really a big outbreak outside of that. So I just, again, and I'll admit, maybe I can't be the most objective on this, because I obviously have a huge incentive for the league to get back going. I want to see it get back going. So maybe I'm not the most objective person in the world on this. But I can just share my personal experiences and how things work. And nothing that you've told me in the 38 minutes that I've been on with you gives me any kind of concern that what Major League Soccer is doing is not going to work.
Now, we'll end with you with this from Kessie, Mike. He said that with MLS, they'll be tested prior to leaving, so it'd be clear if going through that process of arrival added any cases, you've got some built-in time to deal with that too. And Kessie makes this point, which I think is great. He said, I think the process that leagues are using are robust and have accountability. As someone with a family member working at Universal, I wish the parks, who have to cater to a larger audience, could be as protected.
Yeah.
Great observation. Absolutely. And I've been reading, I look at some travel blogs, and I've been reading some posts from people who have been to Universal as guests. And Universal... Look, this is a difficult process for everyone, because we're dealing with new protocols, and in some cases we're coming up with things on the fly. But there were some real breakdowns with Universal's protocols that weren't really exposed until you got a large group of people in the park. For example, to get into the park, you have to, I think I'm remembering this correctly, you have to go through City Walk and then up an escalator through a parking garage where they have people taking temporal scans and asking if you have a cough or anything like that. Where they had those checkpoints was too close to the escalator, and the escalator was actually forming a backup where people were at risk of actually backing up onto the escalator. Well, that's something they didn't really account for, because they didn't know how many people would be there at one time, so they moved the checkpoint. I know that's a kind of innocent example, but these are things that we're learning as we go through all of this. Look, Major League Soccer is a business. The NBA is a business. The NHL is a business. All these leagues that are getting back started are a business. Every business in this country is trying to find a way to operate safely during a pandemic. Major League Soccer is not alone. Adam Silver, I thought, put it best on Monday night when he said, we don't want to give in to the virus and not play. You've got to find ways to adapt and work with the circumstances that have been presented to you. That's what Major League Soccer is doing. And I think they're doing it safely. But they, as a business, as a money-making entity, I think have the right to try to find ways to operate given the circumstances. I don't think they are wrong for trying to do this.
No, not at all. I think they have created a plan that comes at great expense, first off. I mean, this thing is not going to be cheap to do. It is the best way forward for all of these businesses. We've talked about the financial implications if they don't play and the long-term damage they can do. It's a well-thought-out protocol plan. It's got so many different layers to it that there are so many different things that if there's a breakdown here, you've got protection. If you have a positive test, this is what you're going to do to deal with it. You've got everything. And it's not just it came out of thin air. You know, they talked to the Bundesliga. They've talked to all the other leagues. They've all learned from one another. The ones who are doing it right are paying attention. And they're learning, and they're adapting as they go. The college programs are the ones that scare me, but that's on them. That's not on sports. And that has to be made very, very clear. How did it break down for Houston? Well, they didn't test anybody coming in. How is the potential breakdown going to happen at SMU? They're not planning on testing after they tested once they came in. Nobody else is doing that. So they're doing it incorrectly. Everybody else is doing it right. It's not about sports being the problem. It's about people who are not doing their jobs. And that's what it comes down to.
Yep,
and we have to explain that. So we'll keep doing it, and we'll keep doing that later today on Stoppage Time, right?
Man, I hope we don't have to do this again on Stoppage Time. I'm all fired up now. Maybe we'll even get a schedule by 2. I doubt
hope
it,
so.
But I don't know what's taking so long there. But, yeah, we'll break down the MLS is back tournament. We'll talk about EPL getting started today, what we know about Champions League now, and NWSL
final
will probably
today.
That's right. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about today. So 2 o'clock on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. Looking forward to it.
All right. Talk to you then, Mike. Thanks, man.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Kefsey chimed back in as well and said, talking about Universal. They had a dry run. They had protocols. It's just there's no bubble. And that's the challenge. Without a bubble, you can't control the environment. With the bubble, and this is why I'm sorry, Bill Hamid. I'm sorry for the article about what was it? Virile young men who I guess can't control their desires. Yeah, you're gonna have to for while you're there, because that's being smart and being safe and also limiting risk. Again, that's what we're all facing. You run a risk anytime you potentially come into contact with others. That's why there are very strong requests at this point, and in some cases you're not going in somewhere if you're not wearing a mask, because if everybody's wearing a mask, it limits the risk. It's risk. It's not guarantee. It's risk. So you have to measure these things. I think being in a bubble, all the protocols that MLS is doing, they're measuring it. Same with NWSL, same with the NBA. Those are the ones we know right now. We don't know what the NFL's plan would be when they come back. I don't think they're going to go on the cheap and not do testing and all that. And that's why we're going to consistently hammer the college programs that are not doing it correctly. Because if you're not paying attention, you hear that and you're like, oh no, this is bad. Well, why is it bad? They're not following the protocols that anybody else is doing. That's the issue. Because you have a track record. You have success. And it's not even just in sports. You have success with factories remaining open or reopening, with places where you can't guarantee social distancing. You have to have plans to protect people, workers. And these leagues are doing it. What's going on outside of the bubble, you have to limit any effect it can have on it. And you can do that. That's just, you can do that. I thought that was really important on the airport thing, because I'm already seeing it from people. Oh, MLS arrives in 7 days. Oh, no. No, oh, no. You're flying in on a charter. You are not going through the airport. You land. People get your bags. They put them on a bus. Your people get your bags.
Yeah, your
put
people
them on a
get
bus,
your bags.
who came with you, who were tested. And then you are getting on a bus. You can get on the back door of the bus where you're not even getting near the driver. You can have a plexiglass set up for them. They can have a mask on. You can do all the different things to limit that. And then you go in, and as Mike said, you walk into the hotel. Your stuff will be waiting for you, and you grab it, and you go to your room. And then the NBA has it. I believe MLS has the same entry protocols, where you are doing the testing just like you did when you returned to training. You're doing 2 tests. You have to pass 2 tests in a 72-hour period. The tests have to be 24 hours apart. Then you start activity. Then you can come out of your room, and then you can do what you got to do. These are the things you have to do to guarantee the safety. They're there for safety. It's robust, and that's why it's there. Sean Vergara asks, what's a good tournament for us? So when we talk about Atlanta United and what's a good tournament for Atlanta, I mean, they've already set the expectation. They want to win the thing.
Yep.
That's their expectation. That's a good tournament, is to win it. I think they're going to have as good of a shot as anybody else. It's a little early to tell, because you've got teams who are adding players. We've had some homegrown signings over the last couple of days. You've got Franco Jara arriving in Dallas, who was signed on a pre-contract. He was going to come in the upcoming transfer window. He will be eligible for the tournament. It's a guy who scored a goal every couple of games with Pachuca over the last few years in Liga MX. 32-year-old Argentine forward. He's going to help them a ton. More proven striker up top. You're going to see some other moves. Brian Galvan should be part of the Colorado Rapids squad. I think you're going to see some teams try to make some signings. One that I'm curious about is Eric Lehigh, who is now out of contract. Will he come over to MLS and jump into a team? I think it'd be a smart move for a team who's looking for some defensive help. So could he join Chicago or somebody like that? Maybe. You're going to see some moves made. So it's a little hard to predict it at the moment. We don't know the order of the games either. I think for Atlanta United, it's kind of how I felt last year about the playoffs. And this is even with Joseph Martinez out, because I feel like with Mateo Sosetu, with Manuel Castro, you've got firepower. You've got Adam John. You've got J.J. Williams. You've got options up top. You do not have Joseph, but you've got ways and time to mitigate that damage and figure out some new ways to play without him. It would have been harder in the run of the season to replace Joseph on the fly than it is now, because you've got a training camp for a month to get ready for it. That's going to help you a ton. I think it's like it was last year at the playoffs. It's got to be semifinals. You got to get to the Final Four. If you don't get to the Final Four, I think there's going to be questions about it. The group, Columbus is the one that worries me the most. The Red Bulls, I don't think are the Red Bulls of the past. Atlanta should be expected to beat the Red Bulls. There shouldn't be a problem there. And Cincinnati, you should beat. So you should get out of the group, no problem, and then you're into knockouts, and it just depends on the draw. But the Final Four of the tournament should be your minimum goal, in my opinion.
Nope, right there with you. We do have a couple of folks who have chimed in from the morning conversations quickly on Twitter. From our number one, Four-Card Ahmed, agrees with you that it is a sad, and multiple A's and multiple D's in all caps, a sad day for AC Milan with the Ragnick signing coming down the pipe.
Well, it's not signed yet. Again, it's past the rumor. It's down to the is this going to happen and when idea. So let's make sure the news is clear. It could still fall apart. Milan has had a lot of things fall apart over the years where it looked like it was done and it didn't. Purchases, etc. This one looks to be further along than that, but you never know. I just think it changes their DNA as a club way too much.
The Airborne DJ, Tom Russo's in this morning, and he has a question regarding yesterday's comments about limited fans for MLS in September. Mm-hmm. He says, I assume most, if not all of those fans would be season ticket holders, so wouldn't that actually bring in very little additional revenue?
It would mitigate giving money back, would be the thing. In Atlanta, you're also thinking, Tom, in an Atlanta sense, you've got a lot of teams that don't have the season ticket base that Atlanta does. So you've got a lot of teams that could sell tickets. It's going to depend team by team, and it's going to depend on how many people they can have and what it looks like. So it's either new revenue or it's not losing existing revenue with refunds. Now, again, as Atlanta has said, and what a lot of teams are doing, they're making it clear they don't want to give refunds. They are trying to push people into rolling over credits to next season, because that keeps them from giving money back. But if it went to a challenge situation, if somebody's saying, well, I paid for this and you didn't deliver this, well, you're going to have to give the money back. I think you've got a system to allow for that when it's necessary, but you're trying to avoid it. Well, if you have games and people use credits for those games, then you're not in a situation where you're giving it back. You can sell tickets for next year. So you're probably looking at your revenue, honestly, over a 2-year period, because that's the other element of it, is if it's season ticket holders in Atlanta, where you have more season ticket holders than you would probably have seats available, depending on how it's structured. And this is at the beginning stage, too, where it would be a smaller crowd, as we're thinking it might look. You would then, if they use those credits now, then they're going to have to spend more for next year. So it's going to be revenue one way or another. It just might not be a whole bunch of brand new revenue. It might be, less give back revenue in any form.
Then Chris Hutchison, after our Bill Hamid discussion, says virile young men become viral young men if they don't observe protocols.
That's a really good point. Good job, Chris Hutchison. You win the day.
All right, 10 minutes plus stoppage time left. What do you want to do? News around the world because Premier League is back.
Yay. Soccer's back. It never happened before the Premier League.
Nope.
Yes, I'm a little salty about that. All right, couple other bits of news. Let's touch on some things rapid fire, somewhat anyway. University of Southern California, talking about crowds. They said that they are preparing for fans in LA Memorial Coliseum. They are planning for a reduced capacity. And anything is subject to change based off local health and safety guidelines. That's California, so keep that in mind when we're talking Galaxy, when we're talking LAFC. San Jose has been stricter, so looking at fans, but reduced capacity. I think that conversation that maybe some of the SEC schools were having about, oh, no, we're not even worried about reduced capacity, that's going to have to change, and we'll see how that goes. Mentioned it with Mike. This is from Dan Crook of Third Degree in Dallas. Sources say that Dallas was able to welcome back the player who had tested positive. He's since tested negative multiple times, cleared by FC Dallas doctors, cleared by MLS to return to activity. They're not going to comment. You get down to player privacy issues, so whoever it was, they're back. No issues. Vancouver had a weird situation come up. They hired a new CEO back in, was this January?
Yeah, I think it was.
Or late last year, November.
It
was January when they hired the CEO, Mark Panis. November, they hired Axel Schuster as the sporting director. Panis came after 6 years as the CEO at Roma. This is after Bob Lenarduzzi left. If you go back to last year, Vancouver had any issue you can imagine with their fans. You had a scandal of potentially hiding or not sharing all of the information about some really creepy dudes who were coaching in their academy on the girls' side. It was all bad, and the club handled it badly on every turn, and Lenarduzzi needed to go, so he goes. So you bring in Schuster on the sporting side, you bring in Panis on the CEO side. Panis, in his short time there, improved relations with the fans. The fans all really liked him. He was involved in the fundraising with the Vancouver Aquarium, Greater Vancouver Food Bank, that raised more than $2 million during the COVID-19 shutdown. Jeff Mallett, who's the executive chairman in charge of running the club for the ownership group, he said on a media call, Mark was a great contributor of certain things. Axel is the best CEO. So they have let Panis go. Axel Schuster will be the CEO and sporting director. Jeff Mallett, one of the co-owners, he said, and he's the co-owner and the executive chairman of that group, he said, could we continue to have it run the way we were running it? Yes. I don't think it would have been as efficient and effective. There would have been potentially times where there were lags. Hinting at some disagreements or just things not moving fast enough because you have two people in different sections running things. People are not happy. And we'll see how this goes. And this is, people are not happy because of what happened last year and the year before and the year before and the year before, and it's nothing new. So people are like, why'd you bring in this guy who has a track record from Roma and then move on from him in 6 months? Could there be a cost element to it? Yeah, absolutely. One person being in charge of all of that instead of two is cheaper. There's just no way around that. They tried to run from that element, but did that factor in? I think it has to. I don't think we're speculating wildly to say that they're going to save money by doing it this way. And if they had to pick one, they picked the one that they thought was the best fit, and we'll find out if it is a good fit. Seattle Sounders' Harry Shipp has announced his retirement after 7 years in the league. Harry was one of the most underrated players in the league. Really technical, really creative. I always thought he was a number 10. He always got played out wide, but I thought he was a number 10. I would have loved to have seen him be given the reins as a playmaker for a team. Never really got that opportunity. Became a impactful first guy off the bench in a lot of cases. Harry Shipp is a player that we don't develop a ton of in this country. You know, he's not the most athletic, but he was a soccer player. He was a technician, and we need to see more players like that. I wish he had been embraced more. He is going to grad school, if I'm not mistaken.
Chasing an MBA, I think.
Yeah, so that's what led to it. And he was probably at a point in his career, 30 years old, around 30 anyway. He came up in Chicago, spent some time in Montreal, was out in Seattle. He wasn't going to get the opportunity at this stage to be a regular starter in, day out with a top team. And when you have the other opportunities outside, you take them. It's a shame. I want to see more players like him in this league. I want to see more players like him embraced in this country. He's one that should have been. You know, Shipp, Mike Grella is another one that I think of in this type of situation.
I was going to ask you about this.
Just guys who are... Well, what were you going to ask me?
But just like who, since Shipp has retired, who would be those kinds of players that are like a Harry Shipp that deserve more attention?
There's not many players like a Harry Shipp. That's the point. There's not many of them because he's a creator, and he's not like Miguel Almiron, for example. Miguel Almiron would create because of raw speed. And he had a good eye, and he was creative, but his raw speed was a gift. Harry Shipp was just very, very technical, and he saw the game a little bit differently. And he's that kind of guy that in a scouting combine probably doesn't show very well because he's not fast, he's not strong, he's not big. He makes a team better, I think. And he was a guy that I really wish had found the right fit to be a number 10 and have that opportunity to pull the strings for a team. You would have had to build a team around him, absolutely. But that's what you get with that kind of player, and that's what I think he could have been. I think he could have been a top number 10. I think he could have been a national team player. I really do. But the raw measurables for him aren't great. And when a lot of times in this country, that's the players we look at. We look at speed, we look at strength, we look at power, we look at size. You're not going to look at Harry Shipp. I like a guy who can play soccer. I think Harry Shipp was a guy who could play it at a level most American players don't get to. Justin Mapp is another one who's in that conversation. Another very technical player who is different from the typical American player anyway. I hope we produce more players like that, and I hope that they get more of an opportunity. So Harry Shipp retires. That's a sad day for the league, in my opinion. We've talked about UEFA on the Champions League side and the Europa League side and what next year looks like. You're starting to get some conversation. This is more of a long-term process. The Netherlands and Belgium have talked about it for a while, combining their first divisions, having an 18-team league. I think the last reports for them was 10 from the Netherlands, 8 from Belgium. You'd play like a Bundesliga schedule, 34 matches. The worst team from each country would be relegated back to their domestic league, which would be second division at that point. Austria and Switzerland are now talking about it. And the weird thing here is, like, Austria, you have Red Bull Salzburg, obviously, who has created some noise. That's good. The Austrian league is not as strong financially, attendance-wise, as the Swiss league. But you have a team like Red Bull Salzburg. There's questions like, would it raise the level of excitement? It could. The travel is a little more complicated between Austria and Switzerland than the Netherlands and Belgium. So could it happen? Maybe. If one happens, I think more happen, essentially. If the Netherlands and Belgium do it, you're going to see other smaller countries decide to combine their leagues because then they're stronger. They have more power. You get better games. We talked about it from the top league standpoint, but it's the same for leagues like this. If you have a powerhouse team that's dominating the top of the table, that's not good for the league. If you combine two leagues, well, then you're not going to have one powerhouse. You might have two. You might have three. It's going to be a much better competition. You're eliminating some of the teams that are not as strong. They're going back into the second division, and you're going to have a better league overall, and it should raise the level overall. Should be a more attractive product for TV. We'll see how that goes down. But keep an eye on that. I think that's going to be another after effect of this, is you're going to see some of these smaller leagues look to merge in that way. We've mentioned it today, Coppa Italia final, Napoli and Juventus. ESPN has it for a 2:50 start time, so a little bit of a pregame show. I believe it is Donaldson and Bonetti on the call from here, calling it. They're not taking the world feed. I'm looking forward to that. That's the game I'm going to be watching later this afternoon. In Serie A, we've mentioned Roma and them being up for sale a couple of times. Now, that sale has changed due to the COVID-19 outbreak. They are not going to go forward with the sale to Daniel Friedkin. He's a U.S. billionaire. What does Friedkin do, by the way? Do you know?
Oh, I've had it. Nick would know faster than I would, but I'll check it out.
Well, the way this is set to go right now, James Pilata, who's the majority shareholder, he said the offer of about $850 million was, quote, wasn't close to being acceptable. Pilata told the club's website, which he told himself, that they're still open to selling some or all of the Roma shareholding. So he might sell some, he might sell the whole thing. He said, if the Friedkin Group has the money and wants to talk again and wants to make an offer that we all find acceptable for Roma, we would listen. Right now, I just want to try to ensure that whatever happens next for Roma is the best thing for the club, whether that's with a sale, a new investor, or with myself and the current investor group. It's a Texas-based consortium headed up by Friedkin.
Inspiring joy and purpose through life's adventures. The Friedkin Group.
What? That's insane. Okay.
Privately held consortium of businesses and investments driven by Dan Friedkin, from one of the world's largest independent Toyota distributors to a collection of award-winning luxury resorts. The diverse companies affiliated with the Friedkin Group are unified by a shared mission to provide best-in-class experiences that inspire joy and purpose.
All right.
Get a better mission statement?
Heard.
Yes. Anyway, they had offered, this is according to Financial Times, they had offered to pay installments beginning with $141.5 million upon signing an agreement. Then $59 million-ish over 6 months. Then $96 million by the end of the year. Those talks fell apart due to the financial impact of COVID-19. And the revised offer in late May is what was rejected, down to $651.1 million. So now Roma are reevaluating their options to build a new stadium, which was going to cost about $340 million outside of the capital. That's on hold. And you've got Joseph De Grossa, who is the chairman of General American Capital Partners, former owner of Bordeaux. He has said that he was interested. This was earlier this month. He's been in contact with Goldman Sachs, trying to find new investors for the club. He said to offthepitch.com, I can confirm AS Roma is one of a number of clubs we have looked at a very preliminary basis. Keep an eye on Roma and what goes on with this. The fact that the offer went down $200 million gives you a hint of what the impact of this is all going to be financially. It's going to take a toll. It's going to take a toll across the world. Spain yesterday, if you didn't see it, Leganés coach Javier Aguirre, former Mexican national team coach, he was sent off in the 95th minute for, according to the referee's report, imitating the sound of the whistle with the aim of confusing the players, having been previously warned. That's such a shady thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's awful. I'm glad they sent him off in the 95th minute if that's what it was, especially after he had been warned for it. Come on, man. That's ridiculous. Testing results update out of England in League 2. They tested 174 people, and this is for the playoffs. No positives. League 1, 254 people, 4 positives. And these were the first round of testing there. Championship, now, it's 8 out of 22-13. So 8 out of over 2,000. Not a ton, not a high percentage. But 8 is more than we've seen in the championship. So,
yeah.
All right. What's going on, championship? Are players not following protocols? Are players not listening to the advice they are being given? Well, you might need to make that advice a little more strongly. So keep an eye on that one. Quick update on Newcastle. The World Trade Organization report that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that came out. According to Sky Sports, it was a damning indictment of Saudi Arabia's role in facilitating the transmission of pirate television broadcasts. Well, on the backs of that, there is a new £350 million takeover bid from Henry Maurus, the CEO of Clear TV, who we've talked about before. And Sky Sports News has been told that Maurus would prefer the takeover to happen before the start of the upcoming season. Kind of a duh, but yes, that's there. So he would want to get this done quickly. The approval process of the bid that includes Saudi Arabia in it is still going on. There are a ton of questions in it. And as we said earlier this week, the Premier League has never denied anybody who had the money to buy a team. They've never said no. Is this going to be the first time? It should be. And we'll find out if it is.
Yep.
BBC reports that the Premier League's talking about fans in the stands. There's no time frame, so don't get too excited. They also made it clear, Richard Masters, the CEO of the Premier League, don't show up at stadiums. By turning up to the game, you are potentially putting it in jeopardy, something that we've worked really hard for, which is to play those matches at home and away. The sports minister, Nigel Huddleston, said there would be implications if fans showed up at stadiums during these closed-door games. We've had this long debate of whether we have neutral stadia versus home games, and I think neutral comes back on the cards if we can't manage the local crowd. That's something that they have to do right, and you haven't had the problem anywhere else yet. England doesn't need to be the first. Also, for the first 12 matches of the restarted season, the players' names will be replaced on the back of their shirts with Black Lives Matter. This is part of the league's response to anti-racism protests seen all over the world. Masters said that the Premier League will support any player who chooses to take a knee before or during matches. This is what Masters said. I don't see the statements that are being made as overtly political statements. They're ethical, values-driven statements. And yes, I do think that the players are now speaking with a clearer voice, and I see that as a good thing. That's the perfect way to explain it. And that's where I think a lot of people have missed the boat on this. Bournemouth is going to be missing Ryan Fraser after June 30th. He's out of contract, and he's not signing a short-term deal. He's out the door. They did sign short-term deals with 4 other players to keep them through the rest of the season, but Fraser is gone after June 30th.
That is a big cog out of, if you want to call what Bournemouth's offense has been this year, offense. That's a key cog that will be missing past the end of the month. And, you know, we've talked about Bournemouth a lot on the show and how much in trouble they probably will be in if they are relegated. You know, this is just another add to that. Yes, you keep Simon Francis. Yes, you keep Andrew Sermon. Yes, you keep Charlie Daniels, who's been big. And then you also keep Artur Boric. But not having Fraser around is going to be a big miss for them down the home stretch.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to be a problem for them, and they're trying to find a way to stay up. This does not help at all.
No.
In Scotland, today,
the Scottish variant of the 3-letter that we don't talk about, Derek McGregor wrote for them with a couple of bits of information. The SPFL's got some problems. No shock there.
Like, wait a minute, yeah?
Yeah, well, they got new problems, or at least different problems that we're going to talk about. Sky Sports, they signed a new 5-year deal on the broadcast side, £160 million. They agreed to exit their deal for the season that didn't get finished, and it was a cut rate, and it was probably a little bit of a rebate, and it was spread, and we've talked about that. Sky wanted to do a new deal. They did a new deal. They factored in the losses from the current deal. Okay, cool. That's easy to do. BBC Scotland isn't going to be part of the new deal. They are believed to want compensation for radio and TV coverage that they didn't get to provide. BT is locked in a £3 million compensation fight with the SPFL because they're out of contract. They didn't get the games played that they had paid for. They want money back. We'll see if the SPFL gets this done or if it lingers on like everything else with the SPFL. And now you're getting criticism from Brora Rangers, which was a Highland League champion that would have had an opportunity to play off to go up. They didn't do the playoff because the lower leagues didn't finish their season. So they did prevent teams from getting promoted in. They prevented the playoff. So William Powery, who is the chairman at Brora Rangers, said the SPFL is a private members club. Let's make no mistake about this. The SPFL is a private members club. They make it incredibly difficult for teams who aspire to be playing on a national stage to actually get there. And he's worried that because next season, these non-leagues are going to start later, and you even got the championship starting later. I wonder how that'll be affected. He thinks that they'll cancel the playoffs next year to get promoted in. He said, it wouldn't surprise me, not in the slightest, if the playoffs were canceled due to the truncated nature of the season. Scotland's got a lot of problems. In the Netherlands, there is a new manager of FC Twente, and it's somebody that we know, Ron Jans. He is the new head coach over there. So he found a way to land on his feet. That whole thing was really strange, the way it was presented, and there were... I don't know. I honestly don't know. Without being in that room and how people reacted to it, it sounded really weird. Was he just singing along to a song, and was he kind of foolish in doing that? Or had this happened multiple times, as was rumored, but really wasn't followed up on, and nobody really came out and had a whole lot to say about it. So, I don't know. He's back in the Netherlands at FC Twente, and we'll see what happens going forward. Everybody that had worked with him previously said that wasn't in his character to just throw around derogatory racial terms on a regular basis. He said it was due to a song. There was some criticism of that, but there was also some hinting that there was more to it. Any which way, Jaap Stam is in Cincinnati. Ron Jans is back in the Netherlands now. We mentioned it yesterday, Brazil. The courts... An arbitrator came out and said that the Rio Championship, the Carioca Championship, could start tomorrow, and some teams are all excited about this. Some teams haven't even started training yet. So, I mean, the whole thing is bonkers. Like, regardless of what you think about the situation in Brazil, which is bad, and what their plans are to handle these things, which are thin at best, you have a arbitrator saying, yeah, start the league, and you have... Botafogo and Fluminense, who have not started training yet, and they're scheduled to play a game in a few days, and then, play a second game 3 days later. 2 days later. 2 games in 3 days. It's craziness. The schedule's crazy. The rush to come back is crazy because you don't have all of these other protocols in place that you do in other leagues that have come back. Brazil's crazy. That's nothing new, but this is crazy even on Brazilian standards. So keep an eye on that. Botafogo and Fluminense are saying they're going to challenge this in the courts. We'll see if this happens. In Peru, Diego Montalvan, who covers the Peruvian game pretty closely, a player that we remember, Carlos Asquez, who was with Orlando City, went back to Alianza Lima. He was suspended by the club because he was the only player to not accept the offer of a 40% decrease in salary during the pandemic. Said that he agreed to 30%. Could he come back to MLS? Could he be on his way out of the club? Wouldn't surprise me if he's on his way out of the club. I thought he was good in Orlando. Orlando fans never really warmed to him. I didn't get it. I thought he was an impactful player. I don't know if he's best in the back or as a holding midfielder. You'd have to figure that out. But he's a player that if he's available, MLS should look at. Absolutely they should look at. I think he's a good player. Canada did announce that their Canadian Championship will happen in 2020. It will feature the 11 professional clubs from the CPL and MLS. The League One Ontario and PLSQ winners will be pushed into next year's competition. So they're not going to play this year. The lower amateur semi-pro teams, they're not going to play in this year's competition. It's only going to be the bigger clubs. And that was Gwen's tail wagging and hitting the table. So that's why you got a drum beat going.
Thick tail.
Yeah, seriously. So that's where you're at in Canada. They don't have any details past that, but they're going to play with the professional teams. That's the trip around the world in the soccer world today.
One other thing before we go.
Might be Canada on the phone.
No, it's Coca-Cola. For some silly reason, they decided that they're going to start calling folks. And I have no earthly idea why they're calling people. And I think the boss picked it up and hung it up. But
well, if they're going to give Coca-Cola Energy out, go answer the phone and get it.
Come on. Really? It's like I got somebody who could use it. But update to the stats that we talked about from the Orlando airport and Governor DeSantis announcing the numbers. Ileana Limon Romero, the sports editor at the Orlando Sentinel, is now saying that the governor's info was not accurate, in addition to the statement released by the airport saying there were 2 positive tests out of 500. Multiple friends of hers who work there say the governor's numbers were massively wrong.
The governor said 260, or the governor said 2?
Governor said 260 out of 500, and the statement released by the airport is saying that there were 2.
2 and 260. That's
99%
not even
wrong.
close.
99% off.
That's a problem. The governor really announced something that was overinflated by 258? That doesn't seem to make any sense at all.
We have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived.
Somebody's deceiving us. I don't know who it is.
Yeah, WKMG, Governor Ron DeSantis said 260 workers at the Orlando International Airport tested positive for the coronavirus after nearly 500 employees were tested. And now Ms. Limon Romero is saying no, it was 2, according to the airport itself.
Well, and to be clear, she is the sports editor at the Orlando Sentinel,
yes.
Co-founder of Pro Soccer USA.
Yes.
So, yeah, and now people are deleting tweets, which I'm seeing confuses everybody. Okay, so they are working on it. So follow the Orlando Sentinel, follow OS Ileana on Twitter, because they are trying to get down to the details here. Scott Gustin, who is with Nexstar Digital, said, update, 500 tests over 3 days, 2 positive. I want to report to you the results of COVID-19 testing that the Florida Department of Health conducted at MCO last week. 500 tests were performed over 3 days. Thus far, there have only been 2 positive tests from those 500. In a statement, and this is from Scott Gustin's Twitter, it's at Scott Gustin, MCO attempts to explain how the data might have gotten misinterpreted, but Gustin is failing to see how it happened. Just glancing at the statement here real quick. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where the governor got this stuff. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Recent testing, there have only been 2 positive tests from the 500. 0.4 positivity rate, 0.4% for COVID-19. What do you see?
So future subsequent Gustin tweet: 132 employees of all airlines, rental car, and TSA at the airport tested positive from March to June. An additional 128 positives were linked to traceable connections. That's your 260. Somehow that was combined with the 500 tests from last week that had 2 positives to result in the bad data.
Okay, so let's make that very clear for people. And if you see this wrong out there, please try to point people to Scott Gustin on Twitter and others in Orlando on the ground. It's not from 500 tests last week that 260 people tested positive. That is 100% incorrect from the reports that the airport put out. 132 employees of all airlines, rental car, TSA, at MCO tested positive from March to June. Yeah. Total. An additional 128 positives were linked to traceable connections. That's outside. That's people who are family, friends, contacts of these 132 employees. That's not on site. That has nothing to do with being on site. So you add those two numbers together, it's 260. Which, why would you do that? This makes you question any numbers coming out of Florida, because do they have a clue how math works, or tests work, or reports work? Good grief. So 2 positives out of 500, first off, when it didn't even matter because you're not dealing with people at the airport to begin with.
Uh-huh.
But it's 2, not 260.
2.
There were 132 from March to June, but there were 2 last week. There you go.
2.
Wow. Governor, I thought you tried to shade the numbers to make you look good. Why would you shade them this way?
Yikes.
Does anyone know what's going on here?
No, Bruce. Apparently not.
Man. Good job, Florida. Way to
Good.
Be confusing. Wow. Anyway, so this will be fun.
Oh, yeah.
The numbers in Orange County, which, again, now the shift is going to happen, and it's frustrating because you're presenting things without context. But now the shift is going to happen. Okay, the airport number is not what you thought it was. Now, and this is from by Tim Reynolds, who is an AP NBA writer.
Yep.
The numbers that you mentioned, John, about the positive tests from yesterday in Orange County, out of the number of tests that they did, it was 11.9% positive, which is very high. 14 days ago, it was 1.4. I don't know what it was Friday. That's the question that I would have, because we had raw numbers, but we don't know how much more testing is happening.
Right.
We do know that, for example, at the airport, there were 500 tests done over the last week. So there's questions about all of it. There's more positives by a large amount in the county than there were Friday. That's a fact. That is a fact. There are more positive tests. Is it because of increased testing? Well, those percentages, you would think, no, it's not just an increase in testing. But is it maybe an increase in testing of specific groups, of specific areas? Possibly. But again, the most important thing is the only contact that NBA players, NBA staff, NBA league staff, MLS players, MLS staff, MLS league staff would have with the general population of Orange County, Florida, would be potentially bus driver from the airport, would be potentially hotel staff. That's it. None of that is going to be extended person-to-person contact. That's it. I think, and I'm going to assume if these numbers continue to go up, I think the play for MLS and the NBA is to partner with Disney to test all of the employees. Partner with Disney. If it's a cost thing, find it. ESPN, find it. Test the employees. Because right now, that's the only element, is the employees who are involved in this, who are not in face-to-face contact with the players, with the staff, with anybody, who are going to wear masks, which decreases, doesn't prevent fully, decreases the risk of spreading if they have it. They're protecting the people around them. They're not being tested. That's the only group that's not being tested at a significant amount right now. And that's the only group that would be interfacing with the rest of the county. Test them. Test them regularly. Test them. That's the step that you can make to mitigate this massive freakout. The airport freakout is not accurate. So throw that one away. You see anybody pull that one out, you can throw that one in the trash. The numbers that are increasing in the county, absolutely. You're not hanging out in the county. You're hanging out in a closed environment. It's a different conversation, and there are things you can do to help deal with that. That is absolutely a key. On Twitch, all right, here's what we got. Chris Ashley is saying that soccer down here needs to be presented by Coke Energy, and I've 100% back this. So next time Coca-Cola calls you, John, you better answer it. Man. Kessie said they were asking for opinions and if they should sponsor Atlanta United, and you should have told them yes about that as well.
Yeah.
I think they know Atlanta United pretty well.
Yeah. They're both in the same city.
Yeah, I think generally Coca-Cola in this country has avoided sponsoring team by team at that kind of level. I think they've done leagues and organizations bigger. In other countries, they have sponsored teams and been on the front of the shirt. So,
yeah,
now that maybe things are tweaking a little bit and MLS wants to find short sponsors and other sleeve sponsors, maybe you can find a way to get this done, and Coca-Cola can pony up some money and get on an Atlanta United kit. I'd be down for that. Sharif says, fortunate to have had time to listen to you guys for 3 mornings now. Thanks for the Soccer World updates. Thanks for listening, Sharif.
Thanks for listening.
We are here. That's why we do it.
Uh-huh.
Lots of stuff to cover, including everything from bad tests to
math,
bad math to bad reading skills,
to
actual procedures that are in place, all of it, and games. And there's a bunch of games today starting early this afternoon. So ESPN, BN Sports, Fox, FS2, you got games across the board. So NBCSN, because, yes, the Premier League is back, so everybody can be happy about the long worldwide nightmare that we were without the Premier League for a while. It's back. Football's not back. It's been back. It was back in Korea first. It didn't ever leave in Nicaragua or Belarus.
Nope.
Because they're crazy. But
drink vodka and eat potatoes, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. So that's just all MLS needs to do. Just have vodka and potatoes for all the players, and they'll be fine. Yeah.
Consult the Belarusian president. He knew what was going on.
Don't do that, because I think the University of Houston and SMU might be doing that.
Yeah, SMU's already talking to Belarus about their training ideas. Good
Pretty
Lord.
much. Yeah. All right, that's enough. We're done. We got stoppage time at 2 o'clock. Watch it at facebook.com/929 The Game. We'll be back tomorrow for the next show. We'll talk about all the games today. Coppa Italia is the one that I'm going to be spending the most time with. I'm looking forward to it because it'll kick off right after stoppage time. It's perfect timing. And I'll be bouncing around the other games. So we'll have plenty to talk about tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out with us. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.